there exists a peculiar form of suffering that touches nearly every human soul. The endless, exhausting pursuit of external validation. It is a hunger that cannot be satisfied, a thirst that grows stronger with each drink, a prison built not of bars and walls but of others' expectations and our own desperate need to meet them. Imagine standing before a mirror that reflects not your true face, but the face you believe others want to see. Day after day, year after year, you adjust this reflection, smoothing away the rough edges of authenticity, painting over the raw colours of your genuine self with the muted tones of social acceptability. Until one day, you realise you can no longer remember what you actually look like beneath all those careful alterations. This is the state of the approval-seeking soul, living as a stranger to oneself, performing an elaborate dance for an audience that is never quite satisfied, never quite present, never quite real. Yet within this seemingly hopeless condition lies the seed of profound transformation. For when we finally stop seeking approval, everything changes. Not just how others see us, but how we see ourselves, how we move through the world, how we love, create, and dream. The foundation of approval seeking is laid early, in the tender soil of childhood, where love and acceptance often come with invisible price tags. The young psyche, desperate for safety and belonging, learns to read the subtle signals of approval and disapproval with the precision of a master translator. A frown here, a smile there, a withdrawal of attention, a flood of praise. Each response teaches the developing self what is acceptable and what must be hidden away. These early lessons create what we might call the approval matrix, an intricate web of beliefs, behaviors and responses designed to maximize acceptance and minimize rejection. The matrix operates largely below the threshold of consciousness, like a sophisticated computer program running in the background, constantly calculating the social cost of authenticity and finding it too high to pay. The approval-seeking mind develops an acute sensitivity to the moods, needs and expectations of others, while simultaneously losing touch with its own inner landscape. It becomes a master of external radar while its internal compass spins wildly, unable to find true north. The authentic self, with its raw emotions, unconventional thoughts, and unique creative impulses, gets locked away in what depth psychology calls the shadow, the repository of all we've learned to disown about ourselves. This split creates a fundamental disharmony within the psyche. Energy that could flow toward genuine self-expression instead gets channeled into maintaining an acceptable facade. The result is a life that looks successful from the outside but feels hollow from within. Achievements that bring no satisfaction, relationships that lack genuine intimacy, creative endeavours that feel like elaborate performances rather than authentic expressions. The approval-seeking pattern perpetuates itself through a series of unconscious beliefs. That others' opinions are more valuable than our own inner knowing, that external validation can heal the wound of self-rejection, that we must earn our right to exist through constant performance and achievement. These beliefs create a perpetual state of psychological insecurity, where self-worth becomes a variable dependent on external factors rather than an intrinsic quality of being human. Within the unconscious mind operates what we might envision as a shadow theatre, a dark stage where all the rejected aspects of the self continue to live and move, even as they remain hidden from conscious awareness. The approval-seeking personality is particularly prone to shadow projection, unconsciously attributing their own disowned qualities to others while maintaining a carefully curated public image. This shadow contains not only the negative traits we've learned to suppress, anger, selfishness, vulnerability, but also positive qualities that threaten our acceptable persona. The rebel who was taught to be compliant may hide their revolutionary spirit in the shadow. The artist who was pressured to be practical may bury their creative fire. The mystic who was raised in rational skepticism may disown their spiritual yearnings. The shadow doesn't disappear simply because we ignore it. Instead, it finds indirect ways to express itself, through sudden outbursts of emotion that seem to come from nowhere, through attraction to people who embody our disowned qualities, through recurring patterns of conflict and self-sabotage. The more rigidly we maintain our acceptable persona, the more powerfully the shadow seeks expression. The approval-seeking mind fears the shadow because it represents everything that might jeopardize social acceptance. Yet this very fear keeps us trapped in a half-life, expressing only those aspects of ourselves that feel safe and acceptable. We become like actors who have forgotten they are playing a role, identified so completely with our mask that we lose touch with the face beneath. This internal split creates a peculiar form of suffering, the constant energy required to maintain the persona, the exhaustion of never being able to fully relax into authenticity, the loneliness of never being truly seen for who we are. We may achieve great external success while feeling internally empty, surrounded by people who love our performance but have never met our genuine self. Society itself becomes a kind of invisible tyrant for the approval-seeking mind, its ever-shifting standards and expectations creating a moving target that can never be definitively hit. What was acceptable yesterday becomes problematic today. What brings praise in one context brings criticism in another. The approval seeker finds themselves caught in an endless game where the rules keep changing and the goalpost keeps moving. This collective aspect of approval seeking reveals itself in our relationship to trends, fashions, and popular opinions. We shape our preferences not according to genuine personal taste, but according to what is currently deemed acceptable or desirable. Our political views, aesthetic choices, lifestyle decisions, and even spiritual beliefs become unconsciously influenced by the need to maintain social standing rather than emerging from authentic inner conviction. The modern world, with its constant connectivity and social media presence, has amplified this dynamic to unprecedented levels. We live in an age of perpetual performance, where every meal, every thought, every experience becomes potential content for public consumption and judgment. The approval-seeking mind finds itself in a kind of psychological hell, constantly exposed to the opinions of countless others, never able to fully retreat into private authenticity. Yet this very extremity of external pressure can become the catalyst for awakening. When the burden of constant performance becomes unbearable, when the exhaustion of maintaining an acceptable facade reaches a breaking point, the psyche sometimes rebels. The false self begins to crack, and through those cracks, the authentic self starts to emerge. Beneath the carefully constructed landscape of the approval-seeking persona flows what we might call the underground river of authentic being, the continuous stream of genuine thoughts, feelings, desires, and creative impulses that never stops flowing, even when we've built elaborate dams to contain it. This river carries the water of life itself, the essence of who we truly are beneath all the layers of learned behavior and social conditioning. The approval-seeking mind learns to distrust this underground river, viewing its spontaneous flows as dangerous, unpredictable, potentially damaging to the carefully maintained social image. We learn to override our genuine preferences, to smile when we feel like crying, to agree when we want to object, to pursue goals that look impressive rather than those that call to our souls. But the river never stops flowing. It finds its way through dreams, through sudden impulses, through moments of unexpected joy or inexplicable sadness. It speaks through the body, through tension in the shoulders that carries unspoken truths, through the flutter in the stomach that signals authentic excitement, through the heaviness in the chest that acknowledges unacknowledged grief. Sometimes the river breaks free in dramatic ways, through what appears to be a midlife crisis but is actually a midlife awakening, through a sudden rebellion against long-held patterns, through an inexplicable urge to change course completely. These moments of breaking free can feel chaotic and frightening, but they often represent the authentic self's refusal to remain buried beneath layers of false accommodation. Learning to trust this underground river requires developing what we might call inner authority, the capacity to value our own deep knowing over external opinion, to trust our genuine responses even when they don't match what others expect. This is not about becoming rebellious or difficult, but about developing the courage to be authentic, to let our true nature inform our choices and expressions. The transformation from approval-seeking to authentic living doesn't happen overnight, but when it begins, it creates what we might call the Great Reversal, a fundamental shift in the source of our validation from external to internal, from other-directed to self-directed, from performing for an audience to expressing from the depths of genuine being. This reversal often begins with a moment of recognition, the sudden realization that the approval we've been seeking is both impossible to attain and ultimately unsatisfying. We may achieve the recognition we thought we wanted only to discover it doesn't fill the void we expected it to fill. We may finally win the love of someone whose approval we've desperately sought only to realize their opinion doesn't matter as much as we thought it would. The initial stages of this reversal can feel disorienting, even frightening. When we stop performing for others, we must face the question of who we actually are beneath the performance. When we stop seeking external validation, we must learn to generate our own sense of worth. When we stop following the crowd, we must develop the courage to walk our own path, even when it leads through unfamiliar territory. This process often involves what mystics call the dark night of the soul, a period of confusion, doubt, and apparent meaninglessness as the old structures of identity dissolve and new ones have not yet formed. The approval-seeking persona, having served as our primary identity for so long, doesn't give up easily. It may create elaborate arguments for why authenticity is dangerous, why conformity is safer, why we should return to the familiar prison of others' expectations. Yet those who persist through this transitional darkness often report a profound sense of coming home to themselves. Colours seem brighter, food tastes more vibrant, relationships become deeper and more genuine. There's a sense of relief, like taking off tight shoes after a long day, as the energy formerly spent on maintaining an acceptable image becomes available for authentic self-expression and genuine connection. As the Great Reversal deepens, something new emerges from the dissolution of the approval-seeking pattern, what we might call inner authority. This is not the authority of ego, which seeks to dominate or control, but the quiet authority of authentic being, which simply knows what is true for itself without needing external confirmation. Inner authority develops through a gradual process of learning to trust our own perceptions, feelings, and intuitions. we begin to notice the difference between thoughts that arise from genuine inner knowing and thoughts that are merely echoes of others' opinions. We start to distinguish between desires that emerge from authentic longing and desires that are manufactured by social conditioning. This development of inner authority often manifests first in small ways, choosing clothes that feel good rather than clothes that look impressive, expressing a genuine opinion even when it differs from the group consensus, saying no to commitments that don't align with our authentic priorities. These small acts of authenticity begin to build what we might call the muscle of self-trust. As this muscle strengthens, larger transformations become possible. We may find ourselves changing careers to pursue work that genuinely calls to us, rather than work that merely pays well or impresses others. We may discover creative talents we never knew we possessed, having suppressed them in service of more acceptable pursuits. We may end relationships built on mutual performance and begin attracting connections based on genuine compatibility and shared values. The development of inner authority doesn't mean we become indifferent to others or immune to their influence. Rather, we become more discriminating about whose opinions we value and why. We may still seek advice and feedback, but we process this input through the filter of our own deep knowing, rather than accepting it uncritically. We become less reactive to criticism and less dependent on praise, finding our center of gravity within ourselves rather than in the shifting sands of external opinion. One of the most remarkable discoveries of the post-approval seeking life is what we might call the paradox of authentic relationship, that when we stop trying to be liked by everyone, we begin to attract people who genuinely appreciate who we are. When we drop the exhausting performance of being what others want us to be, we create space for real intimacy and connection. The approval-seeking mind believes that authenticity will lead to rejection, that showing our true selves will drive others away. This belief is sometimes temporarily confirmed during the transition period, as relationships built on mutual performance may indeed dissolve when one person stops playing their assigned role. But what emerges from this winnowing process is often far richer than what was lost. Authentic relationships operate on entirely different principles than approval-based relationships. Instead of being founded on mutual accommodation and the careful management of image, they're built on genuine compatibility, shared values, and the mutual appreciation of each other's authentic nature. These relationships can handle conflict, disagreement, and imperfection because they're not dependent on maintaining a perfect facade. In authentic relationships, we can afford to be vulnerable, to show our struggles and uncertainties, to express needs and boundaries without fear of abandonment. The energy formerly spent on impression management becomes available for deeper forms of intimacy, emotional, intellectual, creative, spiritual. We discover that being truly seen and accepted for who we are provides a form of nourishment that no amount of superficial approval could ever supply. This shift in relationship dynamics extends beyond romantic partnerships to friendships, family relationships, and professional connections. When we operate from authenticity, we tend to attract others who are also seeking genuine connection. We may have fewer relationships, but they tend to be deeper, more satisfying, and more sustainable over time. Perhaps nowhere is the transformation from approval-seeking to authenticity more dramatic than in the realm of creativity. The approval-seeking mind approaches creative expression with a calculating intelligence, constantly asking, will this be liked? Will this be successful? Will this meet expectations? These questions, while not inherently harmful, often strangle the creative impulse in its infancy. True creativity emerges from a different source entirely, from the wellspring of authentic being, from the unique intersection of our personal history, natural inclinations, and current moment awareness. It cannot be forced or manufactured. It can only be allowed, welcomed, and expressed with as much honesty and courage as we can muster. When we stop seeking approval, creative expression often experiences what we might call a renaissance, a rebirth characterized by increased spontaneity, originality, and emotional depth. Without the constant filter of what will others think, we become free to explore territories of expression we never dared enter before. We may discover artistic talents we never knew existed, find our voice in writing, develop innovative approaches to problem solving in our professional lives. This creative renaissance often extends beyond traditionally artistic pursuits. Freed from the need to follow prescribed formulas for success, we may approach our entire lives as creative projects, designing living spaces that reflect our authentic tastes, pursuing career paths that integrate multiple interests, developing unique approaches to relationships and parenting. The quality of creativity that emerges from authenticity has a particular flavor. It's often more personal, more emotionally resonant, more surprising than work produced under the pressure of external expectation. It may be less immediately marketable or conventionally successful, but it carries the unmistakable signature of genuine self-expression. One of the most challenging aspects of the transition from approval-seeking to authenticity is developing what we might call the courage to disappoint, the willingness to let others down when honoring our authentic truth requires it. This courage goes against every fibre of the approval-seeking conditioning, which has taught us that disappointing others is one of the worst things we can do. Yet the capacity to disappoint others when necessary becomes essential for authentic living. It means saying no to requests that don't align with our genuine priorities, even when saying yes would be easier. It means expressing opinions that may be unpopular, pursuing paths that others may not understand, making choices that prioritize inner truth over external harmony. This courage to disappoint is not about becoming callous or inconsiderate. Rather, it's about recognizing that our first responsibility is to our own authentic development, and that we cannot genuinely serve others if we're constantly betraying ourselves. It's understanding that temporary disappointment in service of truth is often kinder than ongoing deception in service of false harmony. The development of this courage often happens gradually, through small acts of authentic self-assertion that build confidence over time. We learn that the world doesn't end when we disappoint someone, that relationships built on genuine foundation can weather honest disagreement, that our own self-respect is worth more than universal approval. Paradoxically, the courage to disappoint others often leads to greater respect from those whose opinions truly matter. People are often drawn to those who demonstrate clear boundaries and authentic convictions, even when those convictions differ from their own. There's something magnetic about a person who's found their own centre and operates from it consistently. As the layers of approval-seeking behaviour begin to peel away, something remarkable often emerges from beneath, a sense of authentic purpose that has nothing to do with external recognition and everything to do with inner calling. This purpose may have been present all along, buried beneath years of trying to be what others expected, but it reveals itself with new clarity once the noise of external demands begins to quiet. This authentic purpose differs qualitatively from the goals we pursue when seeking approval. Approval-based goals tend to be about acquisition, gaining recognition, accumulating achievements, building impressive credentials. Authentic purpose, by contrast, tends to be about expression, sharing our unique gifts, contributing to something larger than ourselves, following the thread of what genuinely calls to our souls. The emergence of authentic purpose often involves a shift from asking, "What do others expect of me?" to asking, "What wants to be expressed through me?" This question points towards something mysterious and profound, the sense that we each carry unique gifts and perspectives that are meant to be shared with the world, not for the sake of glory or recognition, but for the simple joy of authentic expression. Sometimes this purpose manifests in dramatic career changes or life redirections. Sometimes it emerges more subtly as a deepening commitment to bringing authenticity to whatever roles we already occupy. The key characteristic is that it feels intrinsically motivated rather than externally driven, sustainable rather than compulsive, creative rather than repetitive. The pursuit of authentic purpose often involves a willingness to be a beginner again, to admit we don't know what we're doing, to fumble and make mistakes in service of following what calls to us. This vulnerability can be particularly challenging for those who've built identities around competence and achievement, but it's often necessary for genuine growth and development. The transformation from approval-seeking to authenticity doesn't occur in isolation. It creates ripples that extend far beyond the individual, touching every relationship and interaction with waves of permission and possibility. When we give ourselves permission to be authentic, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. When we stop performing and start being real, we create space for others to drop their own masks and facades. This ripple effect can be particularly powerful in family systems, where one person's shift toward authenticity can catalyze change throughout the entire network of relationships. Children, especially, are sensitive to authenticity and often respond with relief when the adults around them stop pretending to be perfect and start being human. In professional environments, authentic leadership can transform entire organizational cultures. When leaders operate from genuine values rather than just following conventional business wisdom, when they admit uncertainty rather than pretending to have all the answers, when they treat employees as whole human beings rather than just functionaries, the entire workplace can become more creative, collaborative, and fulfilling. The ripple effect extends even to casual interactions, with store clerks, neighbours, strangers on the street. When we show up as our genuine selves rather than hiding behind social masks, we often evoke more authentic responses from others. Conversations become more interesting, connections feel more real, and the general quality of our daily interactions improves. This doesn't mean that everyone will respond positively to our authenticity. Some people, particularly those who are heavily invested in maintaining their own facades, may feel threatened by our genuineness. They may attempt to pull us back into old patterns of interaction or criticize us for changing. Understanding this dynamic helps us maintain our course without taking others' reactions personally. The journey from approval-seeking to authenticity is not a simple linear progression from bad to good, from false to true. Rather, it's a complex process of integration that involves learning to honor our authentic nature while still functioning effectively in a world that often rewards conformity and performance. This integration challenge manifests in countless daily decisions. How do we dress authentically while still meeting professional dress codes? How do we express our genuine opinions while maintaining important relationships? How do we pursue our authentic interests while meeting our financial responsibilities? These questions don't have simple answers, but navigating them skillfully becomes an art form in itself. The key to successful integration often lies in understanding that authenticity doesn't require us to be completely unfiltered or socially inappropriate. Rather, it asks us to operate from a center of genuine self-respect and inner authority while still being considerate of others and aware of context. We can be authentic without being rude, genuine without being naive, true to ourselves without being inconsiderate of others. This integration process often involves developing what we might call contextual authenticity, the ability to express different aspects of our genuine nature in different settings, while maintaining an underlying consistency of values and character. We may show different facets of ourselves to our family, our colleagues, and our intimate friends, but all these facets spring from the same authentic core. The challenge is not to eliminate all social adaptation, which would be neither possible nor desirable, but to ensure that our adaptations serve our authentic development rather than betraying it. We learn to bend without breaking, to be flexible without being false, to honor both our own truth and the legitimate needs of our social environment. As the transformation from approval-seeking to authenticity deepens and matures, it often reveals an even more profound dimension, what we might call the deeper freedom. This is not just freedom from the opinions of others, but freedom from the tyranny of our own ego's constant need for validation, achievement, and specialness. This deeper freedom emerges from the recognition that our worth as human beings is not dependent on any external accomplishment or internal achievement. We begin to understand that we are valuable simply by virtue of being conscious, aware, capable of love and suffering and wonder. This recognition doesn't eliminate ambition or achievement, but it places them in a different context, as expressions of our nature rather than desperate attempts to prove our worth. With this deeper freedom comes a profound relaxation, a letting go of the constant effort to maintain an image or achieve some future state of worthiness. We can rest in the present moment more fully, appreciate simple pleasures more deeply, connect with others more genuinely. There's less urgency, less striving, less of the exhausting effort to be something other than what we naturally are. This doesn't mean we become passive or stop growing. Rather, our growth becomes more organic, more aligned with our natural development, less forced or compulsive. We may still pursue goals and achievements, but from a place of authentic interest rather than desperate need. We may still care about others' opinions, but we're not enslaved by them. The deeper freedom often brings with it a sense of compassion for ourselves and others who are still caught in the approval-seeking trap. We recognize how universal this pattern is, how it emerges from very human needs for love and belonging, how it represents an understandable but ultimately futile strategy for getting those needs met. One of the most striking characteristics of post-approval seeking life is often a return to simplicity. Not the simplicity of poverty or deprivation, but the simplicity that comes from knowing what actually matters to us and having the courage to organize our lives around those priorities rather than around external expectations. This simplicity manifests in countless ways, choosing possessions that we genuinely enjoy rather than items that impress others, pursuing relationships that nourish us rather than connections that enhance our social status, engaging in activities that bring genuine satisfaction rather than just prestigious accomplishments. There's often a quality of streamlining, of cutting away the unnecessary complexity that approval-seeking creates. The return to simplicity also involves a reconnection with basic human pleasures that may have been obscured by the constant pressure to perform and achieve. The taste of good food enjoyed without distraction, the pleasure of a warm bath, the satisfaction of a job done well regardless of whether anyone notices, the joy of time spent in nature without any agenda other than simple presence. This simplicity extends to our relationship with ourselves. We may find we need less entertainment, fewer distractions, less constant stimulation. There's a growing comfort with stillness, with solitude, with the simple experience of being present in our own lives without having to constantly improve or achieve or impress. The return to simplicity doesn't mean we become boring or stop growing. Rather, our growth becomes more focused, more intentional, more aligned with what genuinely calls to us rather than scattered across multiple directions in an attempt to meet various external expectations. As we mature in authenticity, we often develop what we might call the wisdom of seasons, an understanding that different phases of life call for different expressions of our authentic nature, that there are times for expansion and times for contraction, times for boldness and times for gentleness, times for solitude and times for connection. This seasonal wisdom helps us avoid the trap of thinking that authenticity requires us to be the same in all circumstances, to express every aspect of our nature at all times, to be constantly growing or achieving or expressing. Instead, we learn to honor the natural rhythms of our development, to trust that sometimes authenticity means resting, sometimes it means pushing forward, sometimes it means being visible, and sometimes it means retreating into privacy. The approval-seeking mind often tries to maintain a consistent image across all seasons of life, to always appear confident, successful, happy, together. But authentic living recognizes that being human involves cycles, changes, periods of uncertainty and growth, times of struggle and times of ease. We learn to be authentic about our difficulties as well as our strengths, our questions as well as our certainties. This seasonal wisdom also helps us understand that the journey from approval-seeking to authenticity itself unfolds in seasons. There may be periods of dramatic change and periods of integration, times when we feel clear about our direction, and times when we feel confused or uncertain. All of these phases can be authentic if we meet them with honesty and self-compassion, rather than trying to force ourselves into some idealized version of what authentic living should look like. As we near the end of this exploration, we encounter what might be called the ultimate paradox of authentic living. That when we stop seeking approval, we often find ourselves naturally behaving in ways that earn genuine respect and appreciation from others. When we stop trying to be impressive, our authentic presence often impresses others more than our performance ever did. When we stop attempting to be universally liked, we often attract deeper and more satisfying relationships. This paradox reveals something profound about human nature, that we are naturally drawn to authenticity, even when we're afraid to express it ourselves. There's something magnetic about a person who has made peace with themselves, who operates from their own center rather than constantly looking to others for direction. Such people give us permission to be more authentic ourselves, and we're naturally grateful for that gift. The ultimate paradox also extends to achievement and success. When we stop pursuing goals primarily for external validation and start following our authentic interests and callings, we often find ourselves succeeding in ways we never expected. The energy formerly spent on maintaining facades becomes available for genuine creativity and contribution. The clarity that comes from knowing what we actually want helps us make better decisions and take more effective action. This doesn't mean that authentic living is just another strategy for getting what we want. That would be the approval-seeking mind trying to co-opt authenticity for its own purposes. Rather, it suggests that there's a natural alignment between being true to ourselves and creating a life that feels meaningful and fulfilling. The ultimate paradox reminds us that the journey to authenticity is not about rejecting all concern for others' opinions or becoming completely self-centered. It's about finding the proper relationship between inner authority and outer responsiveness, between honoring our authentic nature and contributing to the larger human community of which we're part. The transformation from approval-seeking to authenticity is not a destination but a continuous dance, an ongoing practice of returning to our center, of choosing truth over comfort, of honoring what is real in us rather than what is merely acceptable. It's a dance that requires both courage and gentleness, both strength and vulnerability, both independence and interdependence. This dance continues throughout our lives because the pull toward approval-seeking never completely disappears. It may become less compulsive, less urgent, less automatic, but it remains part of our human inheritance, the legacy of our deep need for love and belonging. The difference is that we learn to recognize it, to hold it with compassion, rather than being unconsciously driven by it. The continuing dance involves moment-by-moment choices. Do I speak my truth, or say what I think others want to hear? Do I pursue what genuinely interests me, or what looks impressive? Do I express my authentic emotions or manufacture more acceptable ones? These choices become easier with practice, but they never become completely automatic. Authenticity requires ongoing attention and intention. Yet this ongoing nature of the practice is not a burden but a gift. It means that no matter how far we may have strayed from our authentic path, no matter how deeply we may have fallen into approval-seeking patterns, we always have the opportunity to begin again, to make a different choice, to return to what is true in us. The continuing dance also involves an ever-deepening relationship with ourselves, a growing capacity to listen to our inner voice, to trust our genuine responses, to honor our authentic nature even when it leads us into unfamiliar territory. This relationship becomes one of the most important partnerships of our lives, a source of guidance, comfort, and creative inspiration that no external relationship, however wonderful, can fully replace. It's important to recognize that the journey from approval-seeking to authenticity is not just a personal development project. It's a gift to the larger world. When we have the courage to be genuinely ourselves, we add something unique and irreplaceable to the human community. We become a note in the symphony that no one else can play, a color in the painting that no one else can contribute. The world needs our authentic contribution, not our manufactured acceptability. It needs our genuine questions as much as our confident answers, our creative struggles as much as our polished achievements, our authentic emotions as much as our pleasant facades. The problems facing our world, personal, social, environmental, spiritual, cannot be solved by more of the same acceptable thinking and conventional approaches. They require the fresh perspectives and innovative solutions that emerge from authentic individuals who have the courage to think and feel and create from their own centers. Every time we choose authenticity over approval-seeking, we make it easier for others to do the same. Every time we express our genuine nature, rather than hiding behind a socially acceptable mask, we give others permission to do likewise. Every time we have the courage to be vulnerable, to admit uncertainty, to show our real struggles and genuine joys, we help create a world where authenticity is valued and supported. The gift to the world is not our perfection, but our humanity, not our flawless performance, but our genuine presence, not our ability to meet everyone's expectations, but our willingness to honour what is true and real in us. This gift cannot be manufactured or faked. It can only emerge from the long, sometimes difficult, always rewarding journey of learning to be ourselves. When you stop seeking approval, everything changes. Not just in your own life, but in the lives of everyone you touch. The ripples of authenticity spread far beyond what we can see or measure, creating possibilities for genuine connection, creative innovation, and human flourishing that simply cannot exist in a world of mutual performance and manufactured acceptability. This is the deepest promise of authentic living, that by finding the courage to be who we truly are, we not only liberate ourselves from the prison of others' expectations, but also contribute to the liberation of others. We become part of the answer to the world's hunger for genuine human connection, for truth-telling in a world full of pretense, for the unique creative contributions that only authentic individuals can make. The journey continues, the dance goes on, the choice remains always before us. Will we seek approval, or will we seek truth? Will we perform for others or express our authentic nature? Will we hide our light under the bushel of acceptability, or let it shine with its own unique radiance? There is something sacred in the rebellion against approval seeking, something that touches the deepest mysteries of human existence. It is a rebellion not against other people, but against the false gods of external validation that have held us captive. It is a quiet revolution that begins in the secret chambers of the heart and spreads outward like light breaking through darkness. This sacred rebellion often begins with what mystics call the divine discontent, a restlessness with the status quo, an inner stirring that cannot be satisfied by more achievements, more approval, more external success. It is the soul's way of saying that we have wandered far from our true home and must begin the journey back to ourselves. The rebellion may manifest as a sudden unwillingness to smile when we don't feel like smiling, to agree when we actually disagree, to pretend enthusiasm for things that bore us. These small acts of authenticity may seem insignificant, but they represent cracks in the edifice of false accommodation that has governed our lives. Through these cracks, the light of our authentic nature begins to seep through. Sometimes the sacred rebellion takes more dramatic forms. The successful executive who walks away from a lucrative career to become a teacher, the dutiful daughter who finally sets boundaries with demanding parents, the people pleaser who discovers they have opinions and isn't afraid to share them. These larger rebellions often shock those around us, but they represent the authentic self's refusal to remain buried beneath layers of false compliance. The sacred nature of this rebellion lies in its service to something greater than personal comfort or convenience. It serves the truth of who we are, the integrity of our unique contribution to existence, the authenticity that allows genuine love and connection to flourish. It is rebellion in service of reality rather than rebellion for its own sake. Solitude plays a crucial alchemical role, transforming the raw material of our confused emotions and conflicted desires into the gold of self-knowledge and inner clarity. The approval-seeking mind fears solitude because it is in silence and aloneness that we can no longer hide from ourselves behind the distraction of others' reactions and opinions. Yet it is precisely in solitude that we begin to hear the quiet voice of our authentic nature, often drowned out by the cacophony of external demands and expectations. In silence, we can finally distinguish between the voice of our genuine self and the internalized voices of parents, teachers, society, and media that have been masquerading as our own thoughts and feelings. This alchemy of solitude doesn't require dramatic retreats or monastic isolation. It can happen in small pockets of quiet throughout our daily lives. The few minutes of silence before getting out of bed in the morning, the walk taken without podcasts or music, the evening moments of reflection before sleep. These small sanctuaries of solitude become laboratories where we can experiment with being ourselves without an audience. In solitude, we often discover that we are more interesting to ourselves than we had imagined. Without the need to perform or entertain others, we can explore thoughts and feelings that seem too strange or unconventional to share. We can try on different aspects of our personality, play with creative ideas, contemplate questions that have no easy answers. The alchemy of solitude also involves learning to enjoy our own company, to find ourselves worthy companions for the journey of life. This is often a surprising discovery for those who have spent years seeking validation from others. The realization that we can be sources of comfort, wisdom, and even entertainment for ourselves. As we mature in authentic living, we begin to consider the legacy we want to leave, not just in terms of external accomplishments, but in terms of the example we set for what it means to be fully human. This legacy consciousness often deepens our commitment to authenticity as we recognize that our choices ripple forward into future generations. The legacy of authenticity is particularly powerful for those who are parents, teachers, mentors, or leaders in their communities. When we model authentic living, including the struggles and uncertainties that come with it, we give others permission to embrace their own humanity rather than striving for impossible perfection. This legacy extends beyond our immediate circles through what systems theorists call morphic resonance, the way that authentic choices in one part of a system make similar choices easier throughout the system. Every time we choose truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, we strengthen the field of possibility for others to make similar choices. The legacy of authenticity also involves contributing to the collective healing of approval-seeking wounds that run through families, communities, and cultures. When we break the pattern of conditional love and acceptance in our own lives, we help heal generational trauma and create healthier patterns for those who come after us. This legacy consciousness often brings a sense of sacred responsibility, not the heavy burden of perfectionism, but the light responsibility of stewardship. We become conscious that our lives are not just personal experiments, but contributions to the larger human story, part of humanity's ongoing evolution toward greater authenticity, creativity, and compassion. When you stop seeking approval, everything changes. The invitation is always present, the possibility always available, the choice always yours to make. And in making that choice, you become part of something larger than yourself, the great awakening of human consciousness to its own authentic nature, the collective journey home to who we really are beneath all the masks and performances and desperate attempts to be loved. The path is not always easy, but it is always available. The door to authentic living stands always open, waiting for us to walk through it with whatever courage we can muster in this moment. On the other side lies not perfection, but something far more precious, the simple, radical, revolutionary act of being genuinely, courageously, authentically ourselves.